What's up, everybody? Welcome back into our episode of the Lawyer You Know podcast, and I'm excited about today's episode. We are diving back into the Donna Adelson case as the trial is coming up, and we have somewhat of an insider on the episode today. Tim Jansen's a criminal defense attorney in Tallahassee, former federal prosecutor, and in my group chats, he will always be known as Jameis Winston's lawyer. He's got boots on the ground there in Tallahassee, been following this case about as closely as anybody else, knows everybody around Tallahassee, inside the courtroom and out. So he brings a really interesting perspective. And he broke some news recently that we're going to talk about how that works in Tallahassee, in Florida, and really around the nation when it comes to plea deals, discussions, when those negotiations take place, why lawyers may want to do it, why it might be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the situation. So I'm excited to have him on. Let's get to it. Tim, thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure. Honor being here.
Yeah, it's ever since I first saw you on Surviving the Survivor, I was like, man, that name sounds familiar. And I looked you up and I was like, that's the guy. That's Jameis Winston's guy. And that's what you'll always be in our group chats, because I know you represented Jameis back in the day in Tallahassee. Can you give us a little bit about kind of your background experience, how long you've been in Tallahassee? I know you were a federal prosecutor. Just give people a little bit of the background. It's instant credibility here.
Yeah, I didn't go to school in Florida State. I went to the University of Florida. Ended up
Nobody's perfect.
No one's perfect. After my career, I did a presidential campaign in Washington. Then came back and worked for Jim Smith, the Secretary of State, and I was a chief trial lawyer. Was going to the inauguration for George Herbert Bush Sr. On the plane, I met the U.S. Attorney, Michael Moore. We started talking, and he said, come see me after the inauguration. He said, fill out this form. And I was hired. I got hired as an assistant U.S. attorney in Tallahassee. I was there 2.5 years, got promoted and came down to Tampa as a federal prosecutor doing nothing but fraud, multi-million-dollar fraud. Got to know your dad quite well. I did that for 5 years, and then I opened my law practice doing criminal defense in 1994.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Have you been in Tallahassee since then? Is that where you opened your practice, or did you start in Tampa?
No, 1994.
Yeah.
Going to my 39th year of practicing law.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And I mean, Tallahassee is it's kind of like a big city, small town feel. It's got a little bit of both because the capital is there.
Right.
But the courtroom where all of this is happening for the Adelsons, how familiar are you with that courthouse?
Very familiar. Been going there 30 years. I know every judge there. I've tried cases in every courtroom, tried them against almost every prosecutor on this case. I've tried cases. I've had cases, and I do have cases with Judge Everett. And I've tried cases with Jack Campbell, and I've fought Jack Campbell in court for the last 20, 25 years.
That's the state attorney in Tallahassee, for anybody that's not familiar, the decision maker when it comes to things like this. And you broke some news on Joel's podcast, Surviving the Survivor, that you heard from some sources that a plea deal or something was floated out there that if Donna Adelson was willing to flip and testify against Wendy Adelson, that she would be given time served and be able to go home and her case would be over, and they would be building that case against Wendy Adelson. Is that right?
Well, it's pretty funny. It was like an innocuous question, and we were doing it with Joel and Julia from Court TV. They asked Julia, do you think they'd ever give a plea offer to Donna to get Wendy? And, I had this information for like a week or two, and it didn't mean that much to me. So I said, well, yeah, I heard from a good source that she was offered time served to go against Wendy. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. I wasn't a recipient of it, but I know the source is a very good source. And I just thought I'd add that in there because it really wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility of a plea offer. I mean, lawyers give plea offers all the time. Some are formal, some are in writing, some are just, hey, you think your client wants to cooperate? One of the biggest cases, and it's now on Hulu now, is Mr. and Mrs. It was Brian Winchester, and he was arrested for kidnapping his ex-wife, Denise Winchester. And so every case I get a plea offer. Some are terrible, some are good. But the prosecutor's like, no plea offer in this case. I'm like, it's attempted kidnapping. She's not hurt. He goes, well, I said, well, I don't know. I was in Tampa. Apparently it was a 19-year-old mystery about what happened to Mike Williams. He goes, well, maybe you ask your client, maybe he has some information. Maybe we'll cut a deal. Now, is that a plea offer? Is that an offer? Technically, yes, it is. It's not firm. It's not in writing. That's how things get started. The state wants something. Your client may have something. You reach in between, It's kind of like buying a car, right? They want to buy it, sell it high. You want to buy it low. So you end up meeting in the middle.
Yeah. And all the time, it's like, if you're willing to do this, I'll see what I can do. Or would
Mhm.
your client ever be interested in something like this? These things can pop out of the blue. These things can take time to develop. They can be informal. And I'll just say, when I first heard it, not the most shocking thing in the world, right? We know that Catherine McBonowa was given, well, I guess all the reports were she was given the opportunity to have immunity if she would flip and testify against the Adelsons. She said no, shockingly enough, goes to trial eventually after multiple trials, gets convicted. But we know they've done things like this in the past. Other people have been offered and even taken deals because they're really trying to get to the bottom of what is the linchpin in this case, which may or may not be Wendy Adelson.
Well, as a federal prosecutor, why do the federal prosecutors have a 98% conviction rate? Because the penalties are so harsh. They take cases they can win, and they get a lot of co-defendants to flip and come in to reduce their sentence. The state attorney does it also, but not as vigorously. But you get a shooter, like in this case, Dan Markel, the professor. They cut a deal with Luis Rivera. Okay, Luis was a Latin king. He had come up here twice to try to kill Dan. He was present. He was the driver. He helped get away car. They gave him a deal. And you think, why would they give that guy a deal? He's one of the most culpable. But they needed him to get to Sigfredo, right? And then they cut a deal to get Katie. But Katie, for some reason, turned down the alleged offer of immunity twice, went to trial, and then perjured herself the second time. And lo and behold, guess what happens? Charlie gets arrested, and the state calls Katie McBonowa, who's got no credibility whatsoever. I was shocked when they called her. But, okay, so how is Katie going to get out of her life sentence? It's not like they can say, we're going to file to reduce your sentence. They're going to have to set aside that conviction. And there's probably no deal on the table because she would have to disclose that to the defense. So it's like, no, I don't have a deal, but there's probably an understanding. Or there's some inference, or there's some possibility, right? Because I don't think Katie would do it out of the goodness of her heart when she's serving a life sentence.
That's what she
So,
said.
deals are deals. Sometimes they're written, sometimes they're not.
Yeah, that's what Katie said. That's why she was doing it. But and again, exactly what I said before. That could be one of those situations. Like, hey, if she comes and testifies, we'll see how it goes. We'll see what the results are and how helpful it is to us, and then we'll see what we can do. And then Donna Adelson, maybe she's waiting. Maybe she's just going to testify against everybody, and then something may present itself later. Does that mean a deal was offered now? Not necessarily. Does that mean a deal could be on the table in the future? Deals can always be made. Deals can always be
Right.
made in these situations because there is an objective that we're trying to get to as lawyers on both sides. And the just result for prosecutors is that everybody that's culpable ends up seeing their day in court and they get justice for Dan Markel and his entire family. And other people were also talking about how if they need Donna Adelson to flip on Wendy. Obviously, they don't have that strong of a case against Wendy, but you just brought up a good point. They wanted Katie against Charlie. She didn't flip. They still had enough to go convict Charlie. Is
Right.
this, as far as how Tallahassee works, is this normal that it takes this long and they go one right after the next and they just take years and years and years? Or is this kind of a unique situation?
This is really a unique situation because you don't usually have people alleged co-conspirators to have separate trials. Usually they're tried together. You get a table full of 6 people or 5 people, and they're all tried together. Conspiracies, because then you can introduce evidence against each other, co-conspirator statements. Federal court co-conspirator statements kill people, and defendants never understand conspiracy. I think they said, well, they conditioned it later on after she was convicted that she had to go against her. But you don't always mention the plea office. And so Jack came out for I don't know what reason, because if people look at it, really, if they offered a deal to Donna to testify against everybody in her family or anybody else who was responsible for this murder, don't you think that would be a good deal? Don't you think people would accept that? She's 75 and she'd be a convicted. I think people would probably absorb that and accept it.
I mean, from my perspective, if we're looking at danger to the community and she can flip on Wendy and Wendy actually did this and they convict Wendy, Wendy's probably going to have more relationships in the future. If she's willing to do this in this relationship, she's a danger to the community more in the future, wherever she is, if she's dating, marrying, whatever, versus Donna, who's obviously older. And this specific scenario may not present itself, right? If Wendy is away and Charlie's away. So, I mean, I get it. And I think from that perspective, if they do take the deal, and Donna Adelson does flip on Wendy and it doesn't end up working out, they have everything Donna Adelson had that they can use against her then in a future prosecution potentially, so they can still get Donna. So there's not really a lot of risk from the prosecution side, except that a lady in her mid 70s isn't going to spend the rest of her life in prison, which again, I would hazard a guess, right? And I have not asked this to the Markells, but if they truly believe Wendy Adelson is the reason, the linchpin, the person who asked for them to do this, the reason all this happened, they would take that deal in a heartbeat for Donna to flip on Wendy, have Wendy be punished for what she did and have to serve for the time for what she did versus Donna. I think that would be something they would consider a win from their perspective.
All right. As a trial, they're lawyers and then they're trial lawyers, right? A lot of people say they're lawyers, but then there are trial lawyers who are in the courtroom trying cases, big cases, serious cases, people's lives in their hands, decisions you got to make not only before trial, before charges, and then in the middle of trial. You got to make objections. You got to don't cross this, call this witness. But think about this. If Jack wanted to set up Donna, why wouldn't he say, okay, we'll offer you this deal, but we want a proffer? So you got to pass the proffer. A proffer means you get the queen for the day, but the only reason they can use it if you testify differently, they can impeach you. So if they give this deal to Donna, she does a proffer and they don't like it, then Donna can't testify in her own trial because she's already made some incriminating statements. So it's always difficult to make a decision whether your client should do a proffer, because if you think you might have a chance at going to trial, you never do a proffer because then he can't testify or she can't testify. This offer, if it was made, I'm not saying it was, or any offer that was made, whatever the offer was, if they made any kind of offer or insinuation, it would have required Donna to do a proffer. It would have required her to sit down and tell everything she knows and be truthful. And that would have required her probably to implicate Charlie. So it would be easy to make that deal knowing that Donna's probably not going to take it and didn't take it.
Summer is always brutally hot, especially here in Florida when we're out in the sun so much and your skin really takes the brunt of it and it can get really dry and have all sorts of issues. That's where today's sponsor, OneSkin, comes in. I absolutely love all of their lotions, especially the face cream, which I've literally never used before working with OneSkin. OneSkin was founded in 2016 by an all-woman team of scientists with PhDs in skin regeneration, stem cell biology, immunology, and bioinformatics. They also have a scalp serum, OS01 hair, and people are raving about it. People are saying things like, my hair has never felt this thick and full. My scalp feels heavier than ever. So make sure you check it out. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using code LYK at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code LYK. After your purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Yeah, and that's the point, is there's all sorts of stipulations in all of these agreements that if any of them are violated, then they might even be able to use some of what she said. Of course, like you said, they're not even going to be able to testify at trial. It severely hampers her defense.
Oh, yeah.
It just creates so many problems once you start going down that road. It's really hard to backtrack as a defendant. So once they say yes to that as the prosecutors, it's a win-win for you from my perspective. And I think that as Donna is getting ready for her trial, depending on what her lawyers are telling her, she's going to start realizing how bad this looks. She's going to have to realize how bad it looks. From your perspective, do you think it's going to be similar to Charlie Adelson's trial? Do you think it's going to be a similar theory, or do you think she's going to do something different?
I think she's kind of like Teflon defense. She's going to have to be tied to Charlie's defense because she's got to deal with all that code language after the bump, putting Katie on payroll. She's got to explain that, and who can do that but her? So she has to testify. But I think she had a chance until she fled. Okay, that fleeing is the mountain on top, because that jury instruction, the inference of guilt, A judge is going to read that instruction. You can infer consciousness of guilt of her trying to flee. And the defense is trying everything they can. They're trying tomorrow or again to keep that out. But their problem is they have an alternative theory. But the law says if you have an alternative theory, that doesn't go to the admissibility. You could present that to the jury, and a fact finder will determine if that's true or not. So I do not see the judge keeping out the flight and the consciousness of guilt.
Yeah, it's one of those things that people know it when they see it, and the timing of it just doesn't. I mean, there's so many mistakes made. Why not just buy a return ticket? Like, there's just so many things that don't make any sense when you look at her literally like a movie with her bags at the airport flying to a non-extradition country. It's like it all just makes it with the Google searches and all that. It's just that is the cherry on top from them. But they're going to have the same story to tell that they told in Charlie Adelson's case, which is
Right.
this type of story that has a lot of links to the chain. I'll be honest. And during Charlie Adelson's trial, it was interesting to hear how Dan Rashbaum presented that. And Charlie Adelson, was smooth as could be on the stand, had an answer for every question. But it's just a story that almost tells itself. It's a story that just works in a juror's mind. You don't need to have motive, of course. We talk about this in so many cases. You don't need to prove motive, but when you have one, and when the story fits together like this one does, with all the timing of where everybody was, a really good investigation that took a long time, but with the red light cameras and piecing it all together, it's a pretty big mountain to get over, even without her fleeing. Do you expect it to go the same way Charlie's case went?
Well, I'll tell you, this case would never have been broken if it wasn't for Agent Pat Sanford and the FBI going through the bus, getting those cameras, piecing that down on the highway. Not many people know, but I've been to the facility. We have a facility. It's the fireplace, the fire station. It's the not national, state one, but they have cameras everywhere. They have cameras on almost every intersection. They have them on I-10. So they can go back and piece cars and stuff and do the files and look at everything. That's so important. Everything in this case was important. The neighbor seeing what the car, maybe a Prius, and then going back to his whereabouts at the gym and seeing all that investigative work was brilliant. And it tied all these people together. You got Katie working there, getting paid, not doing anything. They were watching her. She wasn't going to the office. And then you got Charlie talked too much and his behavior with his mother was crazy. And if the story is true, don't you think Wendy would have known about this story before she walked in court at Charlie? She didn't even hear it until she said she got in the courthouse that day at Charlie's trial. And why would the mother and her grandmother put her children in the danger of these and killers? Why would they move them closer to those people to be harmed? It doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah, that's really the problem with the whole story is, proving something beyond a reasonable doubt can be very difficult. People aren't there. If you don't have a video of it or a recording of it, how do you prove it with this direct and circumstantial evidence? And it can be a very difficult principle in your head to just kind of think about. But when you actually do it in court and you try it different ways and on both sides, having to prove it and trying to poke holes in it, you really start to understand that the story and the pieces fitting together can be as important as anything else. And that's really what they have here is they had to get the pieces, like you said, from the investigation to fit the story that just makes sense. And then you have the emails and the family law case that's just used against the Adelson. That was just vicious the way they spoke about Dan and what they want to do to Dan. And we know how horrible family law cases can be, but that's not where it ended, right? We have all these other pieces they're able to put together. One thing I found interesting with this talk about Donna Adelson potentially flipping on Wendy, I don't think that's going to happen. But right before her last trial started, it seems like there was a little chink in the Adelson armor where Charlie Adelson became a problem and conflicts of interest came up with Dan Rashbaum representing Charlie and then going to represent Donna, and Michael Ufferman, who we also know well over in Tallahassee, the appellate attorney for Charlie Adelson, files this motion that there's no conflict waiver. It's not written. This can't happen. We've got to get Rashbaum off the case. We've got to get these other lawyers off the case. This is a problem. He's not going to testify. What's going to happen here? And it all kind of explodes to where it didn't seem like Charlie was playing nice in the sandbox with Donna anymore and basically not allowing her to have counsel of her choice, which would be Dan Rashbaum, at her trial. What did you make of all that?
Well, I think that Dan was inexperienced and didn't realize of the potential conflict. I think Dan was too close to Donna. He described his relationship as a mother. He was it was way too close. That's when you always get in trouble. What do politicians always get in trouble? Helping a friend or a family member. Same with lawyers. When you represent a friend or a family member, you kind of do things you wouldn't normally do that I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it because it's a friend and I'm going to have to deal with this person every year. Dan made mistakes. Um, it just none of it. The other part they have to prove. How would Sigfredo and Lewis have any reason to come up here and kill Markel? They wouldn't even know what he looked like. They certainly wouldn't pick out this guy and kill him and then say, "Give me money." That's not how it works, and that's not how it's done. It's usually done by you get paid. And Charlie's problem was he had the girlfriend who saw the money that was stapled. So he had to come up with the theory to answer that too, because it would undermine his whole defense. So his story, he was very good, but too good. And I recall one time watching the trial because I was injured at the time. I had some broken ribs. So I did daily. I was watching it. And the judge Everett asked Dan, "How much more longer do you have?" And he said something. And the judge goes, "Well, I know you got your script." I said, "He said script." And we're all thinking he has a script. And that is what Charlie's doing. He's reading the script that they've orchestrated. And that's kind of how it came out. I don't think the judge meant that, but I just thought it was the irony of it.
Yeah, that the entire defense there was very interesting, and a lot of people watching online did not like it and did not appreciate it
Mhm.
and did not believe it. Seems like the jury didn't either. But specifically where it comes to, it seems like maybe they're not all on the same page and in line again. Do you think that's any indication that there's a chance Donna could point the finger at Charlie, Wendy, anybody like that, go rogue and kind of try to protect herself? Do you think there's any chance of that at this point?
Well, I think it's good that Charlie got Mike Offerman, who's one of the brilliant appellate lawyers in this state, and told Charlie, "Listen, that you got an issue here. You might get a new trial because you had a conflict because you wanted to call your mom, but you couldn't because they were going to depose her, and then your lawyer took them off the witness list, so you couldn't call them as witnesses. So you didn't get to call witnesses who could have corroborated your story." So he would be probably and Charlie's thinking, "Why? Why should I spend the rest of my life if I can get a new trial?" So I think there is kind of a chink there. He loves his mother, but he also loves himself too.
Hmm.
And he probably realized, "Hey, mom's 76. I'm only what, 40? I don't want to spend the rest of my life." So he's listening to his lawyer, and I think he's got really good legal advice. So I think there is a little split there. And there's a split, obviously, between a chasm between Wendy, Charlie. If you heard some of the phone calls,
Yeah.
where Wendy doesn't even ask about Charlie, and then Donna is so afraid to tell Charlie that Wendy doesn't even ask about him. So there is a split there.
Well, yeah, because if Charlie gets pissed off enough and he gets the same offer that maybe Donna got, then what happens to Wendy? I mean, that's the thing. And it's really interesting, and it's a perfect question for you as somebody that was a former federal prosecutor, because I feel like this happens more for the feds than it does on a state level. But where it seems like a group, whether it's a gang or a mob type of situation or a family, legitimate family like by blood or family by choice, when you have the situation, it seems like they're holding the line and nothing's going to break them apart. And then one thing happens and it all starts to crumble. That's something that really does happen in these cases, especially when the stakes get high and you come face to face with what could be the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, this case. The feds wanted it to go to the feds, and Willie Meggs, the state attorney, didn't want it to go. He wanted to take it there. And I talked to Craig Isom, and got to know Isom before he retired. And I worked cases with Craig Isom. I got cases. Really funny guy, good investigator. They went to Willie Meggs and said, "Listen, we want to take Georgia with us down to South Florida, and we want to confront Sigfredo. We're going to put him in an office. We're going to tell him, listen, you got 2 minutes. You can't call anybody. This is a prosecutor that can cut you a deal. Right now, you tell us." And Willie said, "No, just go and interview him." Well, what happened? He denied it. He declined. He got on the phone. They all lawyered up, and it kind of hurt the investigation. So, and the feds probably would have moved it quicker, and you certainly wouldn't have had this conflict happen in federal court because the federal court judges wouldn't have allowed it.
Yeah.
It was a mistake. A lot of people missed that, dropped the ball on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything's different if this is a federal case, in my opinion. It's a completely different situation. But we're here now and we're in state court, and they continue to try to walk methodically towards getting the full justice here for the Markel family. You said you've practiced in front of this judge and against these prosecutors. First, let's start with the judge. What are your kind of thoughts on the judge type? I feel like I've gotten to know his personality a little bit. I've never practiced in front of him, but just by watching these trials, what are your thoughts on the judge?
He's really low key.
Yeah.
He's not a screamer or a yeller. He's a good judge to try a case because you know you're going to get a fair trial. He lets you make your points, and then he'll issue his rulings. He doesn't really lean one way or the other, and he certainly doesn't show it. Now, we had another judge that used to when that did the original trial, Judge Hankinson. I mean, he was pro prosecution. I was a former federal prosecutor with him, and you knew you were going in a tough environment. And then Judge Wheeler, who tried Katie's case, he was my little brother in my fraternity. I've known him for 38 years, and I was actually in the jury box for jury selection that day, and I told Lacoste and Tara, I just want you to know that's my little brother in my fraternity. I've known him for 40 years, and I just want to disclose. And the judge is like, well, Mr. Jansen, I never get, no, Judge, I'm not saying you ever did me any favors or anything, but I want everybody to know this in case I get picked on the jury, but I didn't get picked.
Of course.
But Judge Everett is, I don't think anybody can complain about Judge Everett trying your case. I've
Yeah.
never heard anybody complain about him. I think he's fair in a lot of ways. He's a perfect judge.
Yeah, I really liked him. One of the things that's most frustrating to me in front of a judge, whether I'm trying a case or not, like a lot of civil litigation moves slow. It's indecisive judges. I just can't stand it. Can't you guys just work this out? Can't you just figure it out among yourselves? Let's kick it out. I'll issue my ruling later, but if you can work it out before I just hate stuff like that. He seems to not have a problem with that. He's confident. He's competent. He listens to the arguments and he makes the ruling he thinks is right. And I appreciate the way he actually does seem to consider these things, even if to some of us it's like obviously no, but he'll still consider it and then make the ruling that generally I think most people would agree with. So I appreciate that in the way that he ran the first trial. What about the prosecutors? What has been your experience with them? My daughter is getting to the age where, whether I like it or not, I've got to start giving her some freedom and teaching her the ways of life. And that includes finances. And for them, they can do everything on their phone or Apple Watch or whatever their device is. And that's where today's sponsor, Cash App, comes in. For all the parents of teenagers out there, we already know you're trying to keep up with a million different things. And Cash App is here to help make sure your teen's money and their spending isn't adding to the craziness. Cash App is available to 13 to 17-year-olds with a sponsorship by an eligible parent or guardian. And every transaction can trigger in real time and send you a notification so you know exactly what they're spending and where they're spending it. You can also manage everything, such as transferring funds and seeing the notifications all from one account. You don't have to have multiple logins and sign-ins, and it helps you manage and give them as much independence and responsibility that you think they're ready for. And one of the best parts of Cash App, there's no monthly fees, no minimum balance requirements, and no hidden charges when sending or receiving money. With the Cash App card, you and your teen's balances receive 24/7 fraud monitoring, and if something ever feels off, you have the ability to lock their card right from your phone in just one tap. And for a limited time only, new Cash App customers can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real. Just download the Cash App, use our exclusive referral code FAMILY10 in your profile, and send $5 to a friend within 14 days, and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App.
Well, Georgia's a machine. You can't rattle her. She's calm, cool, collected, very experienced, comes across good no nonsense, not emotional. She'll throw out a little barb once in a while, but she has her eye on the ball and she knows where she's going. Um, pretty formidable. I had a case with her. Very good, very clever, good trial tactician. She pulled something on me that was very clever. I told her later that was pretty clever. And I respect her, and she's got experience.
To deal with it. As lawyers, you don't expect somebody to necessarily be as polished or know the case as well as you do, even the defendant. You think, oh, they lived it. How's it possible?
Right.
He didn't just live it. He studied it. He knew the answers he needed to give. He knew it was in the documents. And again, that's his prerogative. That's what you should do. Your life's on the line. It's not a surprise. But again, most criminal defendants still don't necessarily do that. So there were some really interesting parts in the trial, but overall, I think cool, calm, collected, a machine powerhouse type of prosecutor. Because a lot of prosecutors end up being criminal defense attorneys.
They do.
And she is not. She's been a prosecutor for a long time, and I think done a really good job as well. What about the criminal defense attorneys in the case?
Oh, I didn't mention Sarah.
Oh, okay.
I've
Go
tried
ahead.
cases with Sarah for a long time. Sarah has three young kids, a wonderful mother, a wonderful person, a really down to earth person, comes across like your friend or your daughter or your sister. Jurors really like Sarah. She doesn't mislead the court. She's diligent. And I think the juries like her. And I thought she did an excellent cross-examination of Meg Bonawa. You know, she was and very cordial, listened to her. Sometimes cross-examination prosecutors, they get caught looking at their notes, right? And they don't listen to the response from the witness and realize what just opened up. They're like checking down their questions. So a good prosecutor, any good lawyer, has
I
to
was
be
going to
able to
say
do
all lawyers.
has to be doing both, right?
Mhm.
You got to listen to the response, looking for that door, and at the same time, make sure you don't miss. So I think Sarah's an excellent prosecutor. I think Georgia and him are a good team together.
Yeah, and she also came off really cool, calm, collected. Didn't seem like anything phased her. So, some lawyers you
Right.
can tell when they're on their heels a little bit. I didn't feel like I ever noticed that with her either. And yeah, that's the biggest problem with all lawyers and questioning witnesses, even sometimes on direct, right? Because sometimes your witness gives you a better answer than you expected, or kind of the best explanation you ever had.
Or a terrible answer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got to fix it, right?
Right.
But listening, right? Not just talking as a lawyer, but listening is really important. But I thought they've been a great team kind of throughout. Mainly a female team of prosecutors here. And you have a case now. Charlie's case may have been different, but you've got Donna Adelson, who's an older female defendant. And if she takes the stand, somebody's got to cross-examine her. And the optics of that can be very important. Who do you think cross-examines her? What do you think about the fact that the way they've set up this team for this case, how that's going to be optics for the jury? Because you got to be careful. You don't want the jury to feel bad for Donna Adelson, because that can really go against you as a prosecutor.
So I think normally you would say Georgia, the lead prosecutor, is going to cross-examine her. And I'm sure they're going to make a decision who will come off softer. Would Sarah would probably come off softer on Donna than Georgia, because Georgia just naturally comes off as a very experienced, tough, no nonsense prosecutor. Well, Sarah could come off like her granddaughter, just trying to, like she did with Katie, and that could be very effective. So I think either way could be effective, and I'd be curious to see. I'm curious to see who's going to do the opening for the prosecution. I think it will probably be Sarah, and then Georgia will close. That's normally been how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that could change. I'm sure they're thinking of ways to do it, how to do it.
Yeah, because it can be an advantage for the defense to have seen this case kind of put on multiple times and how they might respond to it. So maybe switching it up a little bit. They both know the case. That's clear. I mean, this has got to be what they've been thinking about for the past however many years, being so focused on it. And so we've seen the judge, we've seen the prosecutors before. We have not really seen a lot of the defense attorneys, at least associated with this case. What do you know about them? And what are your thoughts on how you think it's going to go from their end?
Well, Jackie used to be a prosecutor in the office. She was a supervisor. Then she became a judge, and then she got taken off the bench, or she agreed to get off the bench for a disability.
Okay.
Josh has been a criminal defense lawyer for quite a bit of time. He's tried a lot of cases. He's been around the block. He knows his way around the courtroom. He's pretty good in written motion practice. I've never really seen him handle a high profile trial in person, so I don't know that. And I'm curious to see how they're going to divvy it up. I think Donna will be done direct by Jackie. My understanding is Jackie and Donna have become really, really close. So I think Jackie will do the direct of Donna. And then I think maybe Zellman will do the cross of the state's main witnesses, right? The phone and wiretap and all that. And then obviously Luis Rivera. I don't know who will cross.
Yeah, it's been interesting to me to see how different lawyers have kind of attacked the whole Wendy Adelson situation and the family law lawyers that are involved. There's just so many aspects to this case that as a lawyer, as a trial lawyer, when you look at it, anytime you cross a lawyer, it's a little bit different, right? And there are multiple people with law degrees, even, Wendy, in this case that you have to deal with. And then there's these so many witnesses in this case that, are they friendly? Are they not friendly? And as a prosecutor, it's like, You're going to call Wendy Adelson, definitely not friendly with you, but you need to use her as a trial lawyer. How do you look at witnesses like that? How do you prepare differently when you know a lawyer is going to be on the stand? What goes through your mind?
I think Jackie's going to come across more terse and more rigid. And I think Zalman's going to try to play the nice guy, just asking a few questions. So then, how do they do that with Pat Sanford? Who crosses him? I would think that they probably have Jackie cross examine Sanford. Um, I don't know if Ison will testify, but then, you got the brother who might testify. Robert might testify. And the judge is leaving that open depending on what Donna says, right? When she comes in and says, I don't know anything about anything. I'm just naive. I think the court's going to open the door, let him testify. Who's going to cross-examine him? Because if there's anybody who knows about controlling, I mean, they disowned him because he fell in love with an Indian woman that wasn't Jewish. And he broke up and then he ends up marrying her, but he's disassociated from the family because of the control of Donna. And if
Yeah.
there's ever something relevant, control is the main thing of the case for the government. She
Yeah.
was trying to control the family, including the grandkids.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they've got a lot to pick from, which can be difficult. And there's been a lot of media attention around this case. And some people thought that maybe Donna Adelson would be successful in changing the venue. She was not. A, did that surprise you? B, you've been around for some of the jury selection, I know. How difficult do you think it's going to be to pick a jury in this case?
I don't think it's that difficult. We have a lot of people moving to Tallahassee, coming here for colleges and jobs, state capital. And I know the governor's in his second term, but you get people coming here that have moved here like within 2 or 3 years. They don't know about a lot of this other stuff. And some of them don't watch TV. We're not like a national TV. And the Democrat, some people get it online. Hardly anybody gets it in paper. So, and the law requires that you try to pick a jury. You can't just, change the venue. I was telling Joel on a podcast, the last venue change I remember was in 2000, and it was the FAMU bombing, and I was the one that got the change because the governor, Jesse Jackson, and everybody came in once my guy got arrested, said everybody's safe. They had public figures. I mean, the governor. So we got to change of venue. I have never seen another change of venue in 31 years practicing here in Tallahassee. And we've had some infamous cases.
It is wild to think about what Tallahassee is in people's minds. Like it's hard to fathom what it is because you think of it either as a college town or as kind of like the country or whatever, or South Georgia. It's a very kind of different grouping of people
Right.
that could be picked for that. I can't imagine what the jury. I've never tried a case in Tallahassee. I can't imagine what the jury pools look like. It's just like so many different walks of life, which should be great for a jury, I would think, for the majority of cases. And they've been able to pick a jury in all these other cases, and it doesn't seem like it's been overly difficult in the
Mhm.
past. What have the prior jury selections been like?
I think it was 2 days for Charlie. And you gotta understand, you got the most educated community in Tallahassee. We have 3 colleges here, 3 major colleges, and you got professors, so you have and you have state government. A lot of
Mhm.
people come to college, they stay here and they're in state government or they're in politics. They don't know what's going on in a community about a murder. I don't think it'll be hard at all. And maybe an extra day to pick a jury. You're trying to get 12, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 16 jurors with some alternates. I don't think that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, yeah. I really don't think it is either. And I think we've seen in some other cases, nationwide, the difficulty they have picking juries, changing venues. It just we've already kind of seen this show before with the Adelson case, and I think they've kind of proven they're able to pick a jury. And I get it that every trial and every time it gets bigger and bigger, and more people
Mhm.
hear about it. And I do understand that argument, and I do understand where they're coming from for that. But I mean, I wasn't really surprised when he didn't change the venue. What's your gut telling you about this case, about Donna Adelson? Do you think she's got any better or worse of a chance than Charlie or anybody else before her?
Well, I think she'll come across as a better witness than Charlie, okay? I think she's a little more clever than Charlie. Charlie was a motor mouth. Charlie talked a lot. Some of those tape recordings didn't put him in the best of light.
Hmm.
His actions didn't put him in the best of light. And her basically, you look at the bump, okay? I look at Donna, how she acted at the bump. She was cool. She was calm, collected, not rattled, didn't say anything. The stranger comes up to her, talks about a blackmail, talk about money, about a murder of your son-in-law, hands her a piece of paper. She puts it in her pocket. and just goes on her way to her grandkids. That's what we're dealing with. That she, on a second, can act normal and not say something, not get frantic, you know. But she did call her son, talked in codes, made some statements that are very, you know, inculpatory. This has to do with the two of us, right? The two of us.
Mhm.
That's not a good statement. Secretly talking, going to places. So she's got a lot of. It's a strong circumstantial evidence case, and you can't. You may say they don't have motive. They really kind of do. When
When
you
you
look
look at
at
especially
all
for
the
her in the family law case, it's like
family law case is the motive. I mean, yeah, yeah. And then you got her fleeing.
yeah,
I think they're
that's why
going
I
to
think it's a
spend.
stronger case. It's a
Yeah,
stronger case to me than Charlie.
it is a stronger case, and not a lot of people know this. You might will find it out in facts. But when they bought the tickets, Donna didn't buy the tickets. Harvey didn't buy the tickets. They had a third party buy the
Oh,
tickets so the government wouldn't know they were buying tickets. But she had to get the visas in her own name. Nobody knows that. But she if you're going on vacation, if somebody else buy the tickets,
just seemed like a very peaceful place, Tim. It really seems like a
very
peaceful place.
peaceful.
Yeah, I really think that when I was listening to Charlie's case, and I thought, as far as criminal defense theories like this go, maybe he's got 5-10% chance of winning. We'll see how this develops. We'll see how he does on the stand. But when they're reading those emails and the family law documents, I was like, whoa, this looks horrible for Donna Adelson. And so all of that with the motive and her involvement and her control in her kid's life and what she was willing to do to use her grandkids to get at Dan Markel, like vicious, vicious things that just don't look good on somebody. They're going to hear all of that even before they get to the bump, which she's directly involved with, all of the Charlie Adelson stuff and the money and her involvement in the practice and paying of Magbanua. And then when you get to the flight, I mean, that's something that nobody else has had prior to Donna Adelson.
Right.
And they're going to know it's after everybody else has gotten convicted and all these jail calls. It's just, to me, it seems like potentially the strongest case we've had here with everybody involved as they're knocking these things down one by one. Do you think, what is your gut telling you? I mean, let's say Donna gets convicted, okay? What's your gut telling you as far as will they ever go after Wendy Adelson?
Well, I think they've methodically gone one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, they were willing to they gave a deal to Lewis to get Sigfredo and Katie. They also offered a deal to Katie to try to get to the Adelsons. That didn't work. They tried her a second time. I think they tried to offer her a deal even before the second trial. She turned it down again. And then they got Charlie. And then they said, well, don't go away or whatever. I forget what Georgia said. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. And then Donna said, well, we better get out of town now.
Yeah.
And just think about Donna. She was so inept, like her hitmen. She kept the phone on at the prison and they recorded her saying, we're putting all of our affairs in order. We're going to either kill ourselves or go to a country that doesn't have extradition. Had nothing to do with vacation. So she stuck with that. And the best plans always, dumb things catch people, right? Criminals always get caught. Ted Bundy got caught by being a poor driver, you know? So that recorded call was brutal to her. And catching her at the airport, that just, you can't explain it.
And to me, say whatever you want about, they need Donna to flip on Wendy to prosecute her. To me, it's a little scary almost because Wendy doesn't seem to be on a lot of the, recorded calls and things like that. They did isolate her a bit. She did drive by the scene, but was doing other things and potentially has some alibis, and nobody points the finger at her. Nobody involves her in the payment and, where the money's going and some of the discussions that were happening. They really, really isolated and protected her as much as possible. But if you're a prosecutor and you've got a jury and you tell this story and everybody else that's involved with the last name Adelson's been convicted and is sitting in prison for a conspiracy to commit this crime, I feel like the story tells itself. Again, like we said from the beginning, that it wouldn't shock me if they went forward and had enough to convict Wendy Adelson, which can be scary in a system that is beyond a reasonable doubt. You need to prove that this person right here committed a crime, and it shouldn't just be like, oh, it's a good enough story, let's convict her too. They should have enough evidence to prove it, that she committed this crime beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, remember, they needed Donna. I mean, they needed Wendy to go after Charlie. They need Wendy to go after Donna to get the divorce in there, because otherwise, if they're tried together, you got a Bruton issue. You can't try them together. And they felt more confident once they got Charlie, the jury convicted him. If they get a conviction against Donna, maybe they will proceed. I mean, they're keeping their cards close to their vest. There's certainly exculpatory statements in there. The wire, just the two of us,
Mhm.
and she doesn't know how lucky she is. Meaning, either they kept it from her, and then she makes some statement that and did some things that clearly make you look at her like maybe and she had who had the most to gain. All right,
Yeah,
she had the most to
it's
gain,
all for her.
but if she did that, could she be that dumb to drive to the crime scene? If she knew? I
I
mean, how
agree.
I mean, there are dumb people, but you think she would drive by the crime scene
I
at the
mean,
time?
she did all this other stuff so perfectly and isolated
Right.
herself so perfectly, but then she drives right by. I agree. It's almost too dumb for somebody who's absolutely not dumb. And I think that, that's pretty clear to me. But if you're a prosecutor and you have this evidence against Wendy Adelson, is it something you'd want to go forward on? I mean, obviously they know more than we do and they have more
They
evidence
do.
than we do. And I'm just thinking, like, if you know those holes are there, you feel like she did something. Where is the line? How do you make those decisions? How do lawyers think about that before moving forward on charges?
Well, as the prosecutor, you always have some defendants who are there in that gray area. You always indict the people you know are guilty and you got the evidence, right? But then you always have one or two that they were there, they might have been involved, they actually may have benefited, but I can't really. So then you usually look, what's the statute of limitations? Do I have to do it? The statute of limitations going to run, then you make a decision. Statute of limitations isn't running in this case. It's open forever.
Clearly.
Now, will they wait to see after this case, and then Jack Campbell, the elected state attorney, and Georgia team will get together and make a decision? Okay, we're going to go. Let's do it. They might do that. I don't know, but they certainly haven't indicted her yet. If they do indict her or charge her, they have Castigar issues, right? Because they forced her to testify under immunity. And if they're going to introduce any evidence or statements or anything, they got to prove it wasn't from compelled testimony.
Right.
And the judges go out of their way to suppress it because they were forced to testify. So that complicates it. But I'm not saying I don't know. They don't tell me, but if they're doing it, she's the last one. And if they don't if they don't convict Donna, I don't foresee them going
Don't
after.
even know. So we're going to force you to testify because it's immune, and we're never going to put you away for anything you say here on the stand. So what he's saying is they can't then go back and use that against her later to prosecute her. So it's got to be what happens outside what else they have, which again, to me, I don't feel like from what I've seen that there's enough, and people are going to hate that and
I
they're going to be
know.
very angry about that because it just seems so obvious that she was involved if her whole family was doing this for her. And I get it, but I'm talking about what they have in black and white and in testimony that they can present that we've seen throughout all these trials. It's crazy, but it does seem like it's possible they did this without her knowing about it or having really her fingerprints on anything here, which as prosecutors, you got to fight for justice, right? Seek truth and justice and do it the right way and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, not just say, they all did it. She probably did it too. Jury, let's convict her too. Because guess what? A jury might do that. And then you got to live with that.
Yeah. You hope, and these two prosecutors are not the ones that are going for scalps.
Right.
I knew prosecutors that went for scalps. I had a federal prosecutor told me, he goes, he might beat the rap, but he won't beat the ride. And I told him I don't want to be a part of that because I never did that. As a prosecutor, I always made sure that I could sleep at night, and whoever I indicted, because as a federal, you have a lot of power.
Yeah.
I don't believe Georgia and Sarah would do that. Say, oh, we don't think we have enough, but we're just going to give it a shot.
Good.
They won't. If they feel like they got the evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and they're not supposed to file charges unless they have evidence they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a standard. So,
yeah, and unfortunately, we've followed a lot of cases here over the years just on YouTube around the country where it feels like that's not what prosecutors are doing. And they go too far, they overcharge, they want the notoriety, they want the scalps, like you said, and that's just not the way that it's done. And I think your story is pretty pertinent that there are some prosecutors like that. There are some prosecutors that don't really care. They know they can ruin this person's life. You talked about how much power a federal prosecutor has. And now you can literally, and as a criminal defense attorney, you see it too, like people's lives are ruined by arrests and allegations, regardless of what happens on the other side. Regardless of if the charges are dropped or it's a not guilty verdict or whatever it is, it can literally be life ruining. So to take it seriously, and it's good to hear about, these prosecutors in this case, that they wouldn't do that they are ethical and they're going to look at it the appropriate way. I know there's a lot of people around the country really that are looking for justice in this case. What's your plan as far as when the trial starts? Are you planning on being there, following it closely? What's kind of your plan?
Well, I do legal commentary for the Democrat,
Hmm.
so they've asked me again to do it. So I may go sometimes to the court depending on my calendar schedule, but
Hmm.
I'll probably be doing commentary, writing an article on the testimony during the trial. Maybe do some podcasts. I don't know, but and I will say this: I think Jack also, he's not going to bring charges. He doesn't firmly believe he can, and you don't want that. I think while everybody and I'm like with you, when I say I don't think they have enough, I get all hate mail. I get
Yeah,
people
yeah.
saying that, oh, I'm just trying to get. Or some knucklehead says I'm getting paid by the defense. I'm getting paid by the Adelsons. I don't know if he's seen the articles I've written. If I'm getting paid by the Adelsons, they're not getting their money's worth. Or that I'm mesmerized by Wendy because I met her one time and I said her eyes were I may have said something, but I found out later they were like just colored contacts. And I never seen anything like that. But um, no, I think people, they don't like what you tell them. And this is what I tell my clients every day. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear.
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. Because, people just believe, but that doesn't mean you can prove it. And I had a prosecutor in this case. I'm not going to say who. Say, everybody wants you to prosecute whatever. And their response was, we have to have evidence.
Hmm.
And I was glad to hear that,
Yeah.
because you should always have evidence in any case you prosecute.
Yeah.
Because you don't ruin that defendant, you ruin families,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power they have is
Oh,
something that's really serious. So, Tim, I really appreciate you joining me. Everybody, if you want to follow him, he's going to be writing for the Democrat. He's on Surviving the Survivor a bunch. So you can go check out all those different areas to get his commentary on this case. I appreciate you for joining me. Thank you so much.
thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. And if you have a case that you want to personally talk to us about in your life, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, truck accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.